welcome to the podcast, episode 13. You're with Vikings Guy, or John, as you may know me, some of my friends. I'm here today with Dakota, a friend of mine off of TikTok. How are you, Dakota?
I am great. How are you, homie?
Listen, we've been trying to set this up for a very long time, and I've had VIPs, and now I got a real VIP here. Tell all of my TikTok friends, and maybe some of your friends, who you are, what you do. You're tied to the Vikings, and then talk a little bit about your relationship with one of our favorite broadcasters.
Yeah, so hi everybody. My name is Dakota. You can find me on TikTok at Western Dakota. You can find me on Instagram at Western Dakota. And then you can find me on Twitter at Spitfire Coda. The reason there is a difference is thanks to our good old friend Paul Allen. I had the absolute pleasure of setting up an interview with him and getting to do said interview with him for Vikes Now, and then Dustin Baker, Vikes Now's sort of main guy, went on Paul Allen's K-Fan show where they gave me a little shout out and called me the Spitfire, so that nickname has stuck around. So yeah, PA and I are very good friends now, which is awesome. So I've been a Minnesota Vikings fan since 1998. I've been alive since 1998. I'm originally from California, but I grew up in Minnesota and then came back to California for theater school. And yeah, I make content for the Minnesota Vikings on my own private channels. I do content for Vikes Now. I'm also a regular on the One Bar and Lupagus show. And then I also do Dungeons and Dragons and TTRPGs as another thing. So I'm on a couple different podcasts for that as well.
Yeah. Well, and when I first met you, I have told you this. I wasn't really sure what to make of you not because you were anything bad, but because you just do so many different things.
Yeah.
And you don't do many of those quote unquote girl things. Like growing up, my daughter or my sister Jenny was it was what you would call a tomboy back then. Very much into sports, and I love that. I mean, she was my little sister, but she could go out there and hit a dinger, and she could play catch with a football, and she'd throw punches like the boys, and it was mostly a male-dominated family. And so it was nice to see, and my daughters are as big of football fans as any of my sons. I mean, they really are into football, and so it was refreshing to see all these different interests. And then Dungeons and Dragons, I was like, what? I mean, because, it's that whole appearances are deceptive sometimes.
Yeah.
Because, I wouldn't have looked at you and went, oh, yeah, that's definitely Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, too, because obviously for so long there was this huge, us versus them mentality when it came to, sports fans and, nerds. But I find nowadays, thanks to the internet, a lot of people are realizing that we have a lot more in common than we actually do apart. I mean, if you think about it, Dungeons and Dragons is really just a game of math and statistics. And what is football? A game of math and statistics. It's really just both games are really just the dream for anybody who loves to recognize patterns, who loves to get their anger out by cheering at random men, and to really just kind of both are really, really great at connecting people. I've found, especially in a COVID world in 2020, I found that it was really hard for me to connect to people. And so I did turn to Dungeons and Dragons. I did turn to football when I didn't really have any in-person friends when I was in New York. And I found that both of them are very, very similar in the mentality of, community. It's my community. These are my people. And so then to kind of simultaneously on Twitter and on TikTok grow my platform for one or the other, at one point I was like, why not do both? I find humans to be a very multifaceted creature, and I think a lot of content creators sometimes get themselves in this rut in that they have to only post one thing. That's where all of their views come from. It has to be for one thing. But I have found the most success when I combine my two things. I had a very popular series, which I'm, knock on wood, am going to be bringing back, where I would put the different quarterbacks into different D&D classes. And you know who loved that?
I remember that. Yeah, I remember that. I remember going, oh, this girl.
But it made sense.
It did. It really did. And when I tell people, go to TikTok. If you're not on TikTok, you're missing the boat. I think I'm hearing good things. Like, they're not going to ban TikTok now. I've heard that.
Oh, thank God.
So that's good. I mean,
Yeah.
of all the things that came in that election, we won't get into that, but of all the things that came, that administration said we're not banning TikTok, which whatever reason it was, to me, they can work out the Chinese thing, but they just to silence a group of people who, I mean, that's their incomes. This is a livelihood for
Right.
people. Some people get on TikTok and they scroll, and it's like most people, it's fun and games. But for people like you, for kind of people like me, it's an income.
Right.
It's a way of getting our message out there. It's a way of meeting people, of connecting and creating those networks. And so to take that away just felt wholly unfair without really giving us a solution. Someone's just got to come up with $4 billion and buy TikTok. That just seemed really unfair.
Right.
And it felt like a solution that was never going to come. And then if you care about the people that are in your constituency, you're just going to lop them off. And so I always just hated that because I feel there's so many ways now that people get censored out.
Yeah.
And I've said that one of the reasons I branched out away from TikTok, it's not that I love TikTok, but part of it is that there is so many limitations on what you can say.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
The other day I made a comment. I said the bears are a wounded animal. They're behaving like a wounded animal. And it's time, this is in one of my lives, I said it's time for the Vikings to deliver the kill shot on the wounded bears.
Yeah.
They said you have 60 seconds or you're being permanently banned. I mean, they don't suss that out.
No.
And I see some of these creators, they're OF creators. God bless them for what they do. And they're sitting there showing their crotches and doing different things. And I'm going, how is me saying we're going to take out a fictional animal? How has that hit the level of terrorism or all those different kinds of things
Right.
that were never intended, right? And you've been in my lives. I rarely go after people because that's not who I am.
Right.
I try to make it a pretty inclusive space for all different teams, fans to come in, and we talk shit because that's what you do as a fan. That's why you're called a fanatic, right?
Exactly.
But that's part of the reason I branched out away from TikTok is because the first time I got banned from live for a week, it scared the hell out of me because I thought I have no other ways to get to my people.
Right.
And to me, the money is good, but what I really enjoy is the people. The reason I get on there every night is I feel like an obligation to those people to give them the things that they're asking for,
Right.
because I want them to feel good about what we're doing. And it irritates the shit out of my kids, but I'll be in a random place. When I was in London, of course, I'm surrounded by Viking fans, and this guy comes up. He says, "I hate to interrupt you, but are you Vikings Guy?"
Yeah.
My older daughter just hated that. And the other night I'm in a local Subway and I'm ordering my food for my family. And I said, hey, I want this sub, blah, blah. And this guy says, dude, you're going to think this is crazy. Are you on TikTok? Are you the Vikings Guy? And I said, it is nice to hear that because it's recognizable.
Yeah.
And I do like the fact that people tune in, and I have people that say, well, I tune in every night. I had one guy, this is so crazy, Kota. He says, I come home at night, I cook dinner, I say hi to my wife, we talk, but I tell her every night at 8:30 Central, I'm with Vikings Guy for at least an hour.
Cute. Aw.
That's part of his schedule.
Yeah.
And so when you hear that, I don't want, like I said, I don't want to let people down.
Right.
Right? I feel like an obligation, which some people who listen to that might be like, dude, you're crazy. But I do feel that obligation to people.
No, I 100% agree. And as you know, I recently started a new job. And so I haven't been going live as often as I would like to. And I'm still trying to find times where I can. But I have a Discord server for all of my followers. And so because I haven't been live as often as I would like to, I've been trying to find ways to get more interactive with my followers, because similar to you, I try to make a space for my followers that is safe for any fan of any team, and really just for anybody. And I find too, especially nowadays, I feel like, before TikTok and before social media was really big, there was always this us versus them mentality in the NFL. And it's still there, and that's always going to be there. That's just part of the NFL, is my team is better than yours, my team is whatever. Yeah. But the nice thing about TikTok and Twitter and Instagram and social media nowadays is that it is still there. But it's a lot more fun now because it's not you're not just only consuming the content of your own team, you're consuming every team's content. What pushed me into the Creator Fund was actually a TikTok where I shouted out the Detroit Lions for having a really great social media strategy. I think that they are probably one of the best teams, other than maybe the Chargers and the Bills, that have one of the best social media strategies. I think the reason why they are starting to be considered quote unquote America's team, as much as we as Vikings fans hate it, is purely because their social media is not doing what other social media teams are. They're actively engaging with content creators, whether they're big like Adventures in Ardia, or they're small like me. The Detroit Lions follow me, and we have a rapport. We have inside jokes, and I only have 14.2 thousand followers. And to me, that's huge. And so because of that, now I have friends who are Detroit Lions fans. Now I'm actively seeing stuff about the Detroit Lions, which, as both a fan and as somebody who makes content, is great. I would love to know what the Lions are up to. I think it's very smart as Vikings fans and as somebody who creates content and would love to make this a job event, like a full-time job where I can like live sustainably off of this. It is very smart to know how fans of other teams feel, what other teams are up to, and it makes what we do possible, because then we can go on live and we can go, oh, this is what I'm hearing. This is what I'm hearing. And we can slowly get credibility to that place where, like you said, people rely on us. And I hate to like put myself or anybody on a pedestal, because at the end of the day, and I say this a lot in my own lives, we are just people on the internet. We show people on the internet what we wish to see, what we wish for them to see. But it's almost nice in a way that there is somebody out there, whether it's me, whether it's you, whether it's a third party, putting themselves out there, because you never know how people get their information. And like, I think about the Matthew Stafford trade that was going around, and I think about the way that that got around, and I posted a video debunking it, and a bunch of people were like, yo, thank you for posting this, because I was genuinely buying into it. And I think, you know, as much as your kids may hate it, there is a responsibility when you do have that kind of following that I don't think a lot of people realize, which is, you know, it's like if your daily news anchor is out for that one day, you don't really trust that backup guy. You don't trust that substitute guy. Or, you know, when you watch a Vikings game and it's like the third rate commentators and analysts, it's like, okay, but like, how much do they really know when they only see a certain amount? And on top of that, it's familiarity. I think certain content creators stay in style, like you and I, because even though we like I said, I post a wide variety of things because I've got ADHD, if you couldn't tell, and I have a.
I wasn't going to out you on that, but sure.
I'll out it.
I just called a lot of energy. It's got a lot of energy,
just a little bit, but
yeah, a little bit.
You know, I'm still consistent in what I post, and people know what to expect of me. And in this crazy, crazy world where things are changing so rapidly, having consistency is so nice. Like I don't work this week because of the holiday, and I have found that lack of a schedule that I normally have with my job has thrown me way out of a loop. But yeah, it's just it's nice that we have social media to be able to connect with people, because I never thought it would be possible that something that I grew up watching with my dad and my uncles would ever amount to, you know, the little bit of income that I get monthly from it. Never did I think that I'd be followed by an NFC North team on social media. Never did I expect to be at a place where I'm, you know, I'm not sure if I told you, I got invited to a convention in Philadelphia, thanks to some dear friends of mine at one of the podcasts I'm on. And it's like one of the biggest conventions for like Dungeons and Dragons and TTRPG. And you know what they're having there? A panel about being a nerd who is also into sports. Like, come on.
It's Revenge of the Nerds. It's the current Revenge of the Nerds. Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I think brought quote unquote nerds to the forefront was the leadership of so many of these football teams, including our favorite one, is led by analytics, is led by mathematics, is led by statistics. And there's part of me as an old school guy that's sort of reticent against embracing all of it. Because, you know, they can tell you, okay, like in baseball, a guy gets up, this guy hits 330 against this guy if he's right-handed. If he goes left-handed, he hits 270. And this guy hits 300 all the time, so we're going to put him in. Yeah, but that guy might be a rookie who's never played in the playoffs before. You got this other guy who's in his 8th season who's played in 2 World Series. So but that's, you can't quantify that
Right.
experience. They don't quantify it the same way. And so do you want the guy that you know is the gamer? Because there's guys on your team where you go, when the shit hits the fan, we go to JJ.
Right.
He's our bailout. He's our ride or die. He's the guy that's going to push us over the top. If you really need to play, like we did against the Bills a couple of years ago, they didn't find Jalen Naylor. They didn't find, a lesser guy. They didn't find Brandon Powell. They found Justin Jefferson because he's the difference maker.
Right.
And no knock on those guys. I mean, they're good players. You don't play unless you are. But the analytics thing, I think that's part of what's pushed quote unquote nerds to the forefront, is that there's a lot more of those heavy thinkers that are getting positions. And I think it started with the Cleveland Browns. They had a
Yeah.
guy there that was all analytics all the time, and it was a baseball analytics guy.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting too because then you get this like really weird because there are people who are like, don't listen to analytics, just watch the game. Then you've got people who are so analytical that they look at, to help segue us into the they look at JJ in the Bears game and they're like, oh well, JJ's fallen off because he only had 2 receptions for 24 yards, and it's like, well, actually, him having 24 yards and 2 receptions is why we won. Because they were triple teaming him. They were constantly, if you look at the footage, if you look at some of the still shots, there is not a play that I have seen where JJ should not have pulled a flag. They had their hands all over him. They were triple teaming him. And people are like, well, they would never do that to, whoever. And it's like, well, yeah, they don't do that to insert your favorite player here, because they're not that good.
Right.
They're not as good as Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson made the all-time yards for a rookie in their first 5 seasons halfway through his 5th season. The season isn't even over yet. He has time to make that achievement so insanely unattainable. He has his 4 or 5 games left, potentially playoffs.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
Or actually, not even potentially playoffs. We have a 98% chance of getting into the playoffs. Yeah. But I think analytics are good. I think it is good to study analytics, but I don't think people should take them as seriously, because then you have, Jared Allen. Not Jared Allen. He is no longer plays. You have Jared Goff. That's who I was thinking of. You have Jared Goff throwing 5 interceptions, yet still having an insanely great game, despite throwing those 5 interceptions. You have Sam Darnold that same week throwing, I think, 2-3 interceptions, but also still having an insanely great week. So
it was funny that week because in the afternoon the Vikings won. Darnold had thrown 3 interceptions. And here come the Lions, as much as you love their fans, here come the torch and pitchfork people. Oh, look what Darnold did. You're not going to win in the playoffs if he throws 3 interceptions.
Right.
And then Goff said, well, here, hold my beer. And this is the disturbing part of it, or the kind of the disingenuous part of Goff's interceptions. One of them was tipped.
Yeah.
The other one was a Hail Mary at the end of the pass, or at the end of the half. So there's 2 interceptions wiped off the board. I mean, 3 isn't great. And at the end of the day, the Lions won that. Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting thing around here, and I had brought this up to Adam Rank too. With Jefferson, first off, he's averaging more yards per game than any wide receiver in the history of the NFL. Mm-hmm. Now, think about that. Largent, Moss, Rice, Chris Carter, none of them averaged almost 100 yards a game. None of them. None of them. Right? And that's Jefferson. And I find myself constantly defending Justin Jefferson, not just his play on the field, but I defend his character as a human being. He is one of the finest people I've ever had the courtesy of meeting. He is just the most decent, straight up guy. He's confident, but he's not arrogant. And for a guy that's accomplished all that he's accomplished, he's got a good family. His mom and dad come to the game. He's motivated by his siblings. I mean, he lives in a regular condo in a nice part of the cities. He's not living over in Excelsior in a 7,000 square foot joint. I mean, he's just such a good guy, and it's not hard to cheer for Justin Jefferson. And when you see like the games he had on Sunday where he catches 27 yards, 2 passes, 1 actually in overtime, only 1 in regular time. But you can't. The statistics don't properly quantify how many yards he had taken away because of penalties against him. They don't quantify the blocks that he made to spring guys.
Mm-hmm.
They don't quantify the effect that it has for Jordan Addison, for Hawkinson, for Aaron Jones, for Naylor, for all the guys now that can also not be double teamed because they don't have the guys.
And he was asked about it too. They asked him about it, and he was like, "Listen, if it's a toss up between get Justin Jefferson the ball and get the other guys the ball, I'm going with the second one. If that's the game plan, that is what I am backing."
Yep. Yeah. It's easier to live that philosophy when you win.
Right.
Right? Yeah. I mean, I think if the Vikings lose and Jefferson's only getting 2 throws,
then it's like, what's going on?
Again, well, not even him. It's the media and it's regular people saying,
he's washed.
How come you're not throwing to Jefferson? Right. And, going back, I want to go back to one thing and then we'll jump into the Bears game. There's sort of I don't want to call it, it's sort of like a class warfare. Because I think things like you and I do, it's really small J journalism.
Oh, for sure.
And it's not meant to compete with ESPN, Fox Sports, quote unquote, some of the professionals. Even though I saw a funny article or a video the other day. Ian Rappaport was on NFL Network on The Insiders, and he was telling a story. Excuse me. He was telling a story of how 2 or 3 years, it was probably longer than that even, but Mike Mularkey, who coached in Minnesota, he's a Minnesota guy, was coaching at Tennessee. And Mike Mularkey knew he was getting fired. Bud Adams told him, "You're getting fired." He called up Ian Rappaport and told him, "Hey, I'm getting a contract extension. Spread that around." So he fake scooped Rappaport. Rappaport he ran with it.
Well, of course.
Of course, the next day they come out and, excuse me, and Mularkey gets fired. And Rappaport's like, "What?" And so it was Garofalo and it doesn't matter. Another guy from the NFL Network. He's from the Twin Cities. I can't think of his name now. But he's sitting there, and Rappaport, years later was still pissed. He was still pissed about it. He goes, "That's just not professional." And Garofalo says, "Well, you were a young guy. You probably wouldn't get scooped like that again, right?" But you could see the look on Rappaport's face. So there is sort of a anguish from the people who do this on the regular about who is this guy or gal just showing up on the internet and talking football and getting all these views. What about us? Like, you're stealing from us. And I think that's there. Not everyone does that, but I think that's the wrong way for those folks to go at it.
Oh, for sure.
Because there's enough Apple for everyone.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion.
No, I think a lot about the draft time on Twitter. There were so few people who were like, "Yeah, JJ McCarthy." Most people were, I think they were betting on Drake May, if I remember correctly. Yeah. Most people were like, "No, it's going to be Drake May. No, it's going to be Drake May." And like some of the moves, like Josh McCown getting put as the quarterback coach, and like people were like, he coached Drake May in high school or whatever. And to me, the second they made that move, I was like, they're not going with Drake May. They are not going with Drake May, and the reason why is because Kevin O'Connell, I watch that man in his press conferences. I look at him. He was pissed when Kirk Cousins left, and you can't tell me otherwise. He was pissed when Kirk Cousins left. And I know this because I watched Josh McCown as a quarterback. I've watched him as a quarterback. I've seen the teams that he has coached for quarterbacks. I look at Drake May. I look at Kirk Cousins. No. I look at JJ McCarthy, and I look at Kirk Cousins. And then Sam Darnold gets thrown into the mix. And I posted a TikTok where I said Sam Darnold's play style is a scrappier Kirk Cousins, and people thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
Who's crazy now? And the thing is that none of the bigger ESPN people were talking about this. They weren't talking about this because, first of all, who cares about the Vikings when Kirk Cousins just got an insanely good contract and they picked up Sam Darnold. Meanwhile, I'm over here, tiny ass sports content creator, pardon my French, but, studying the way that our coach behaves, looking at all of these moves, thinking they got to build their defense and they got to get a quarterback of the future. I'm not throwing away those 2 picks that we have in the first round like everyone wants us to. I am trading up maybe to 10th to JJ McCarthy, and then I'm sticking back for another corner or for Dallas Turner. And I think I even named Dallas Turner in an episode of Vikes Now.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, no, we're going to sell the farm. We're going to sell the farm. It's our quarterback of the future. Like, come on. To me, it was just, the Drake May move was too obvious. It was way too obvious. Yeah. And I think, you know, like you said, a lot of these bigger ESPN, athletic, whatever kind of people, they look at the big picture. And so for them, it's not their team. So they don't care what happens. Right. They want something to write about. And I'm sitting here, you know, at the time I didn't even have 4. I think I just barely hit like 11,000. And I was, you know, not really doing that well on Twitter. Vikes Now was in a low point because it was the off season. And I'm sitting here defending this stance, being like, I've seen Kevin O'Connell talk about JJ McCarthy, and I've seen him talk about Drake May. I know from his body language who he wants. And it's just crazy to me because I think if the people of ESPN, if the people of Athletic, etc., had taken the time to study a lot of those moves that the Vikings had made, like I had, like you had, like other smaller content creators had, they would have seen the story of the Drake May versus JJ McCarthy situation.
Yeah.
And
I think we deal with a lot less clutter not being really in it, per se. We don't have all the clutter, the background noise of so-and-so said this, so-and-so said this. I want to piggyback off of what you said about Dallas Turner. You know, I spoke to Dallas Turner's father, and I asked him how he liked Minnesota. And Dallas Turner's father said, well, he's a little nervous about the winters because, you know, he was in Alabama and he's a Miami kid. I suggested to him what he should buy for a pickup. He has a Range Rover, so we covered that. But more importantly, he said, you know, my son was fully prepared, and the Falcons called him the night of the draft and said, we're taking you. Yeah, we're taking you. And then they call back and say, whoops, we still want to take you. We're going to try and move up, but they couldn't. And that's where he fell to the Vikings. And I actually ran into Josh McCown as well, because there's a little ditty that Josh McCown pulled on the Vikings back in 2003 where he knocked us out of the playoffs. And I said, listen, man, I love you. You had a great career, but I'll never forget 2003. And Josh McCown looks at me and says, you people just never forget, do you?
No, and that's the other thing.
I said, ask Paul Allen if he forgot. He didn't forget.
That's the other thing, too. When we got Josh McCown, I'm like, no, they got this guy for a reason. It's because he was an insanely good quarterback who knows how to win tight games in the playoffs.
Yeah, and he's a smart guy.
He's
Super
such
smart
a smart guy. And to me, it's like, that was part of the reason why it's such an issue going into the preseason with everyone saying that the Vikings' ceiling was only 6 wins. I was like, no. We're in a competitive rebuild. If you're in a total rebuild year, you don't go for a guy like Josh McCown right away. You wait, see if he ends up somewhere else, and then you take him. They took him immediately after I think it was like right after they got Sam. And I was like, I think I first predicted, I believe, I don't remember which draft show it was on because I was on a couple, but I first predicted us at, I think I said 12-5 is where I had us. And then I upped it to 14-3.
Yeah, that's great.
Who's laughing now?
Yeah. No, I know. Well, and that draft night was wild because all the big guys were going off the page, and you know, Dallas Turner's dad thought too that are we going to fall to the second round because of all this offense, and all this offense. So I'm going to play a clip right now. Okay. We'll segue into the Bears-Vikings game. You know, for about 2.5 hours, that game was pretty much nothing. And then, of course, it became something. As I'm sitting there melting down in front of my children, trying to keep them from falling apart.
Right.
But I'll let you listen to it. I'll turn it up here and we'll listen to this quick.
Four and five. Win consecutive road games for the first time in franchise
ever.
Overall, and won 5 consecutive times at Soldier Field.
And that's wild. You think about the history of the Minnesota Vikings. That clip was courtesy of K-Fan and Paul Allen, the voice of the Vikings and the Viking Entertainment Network. But you think about what he just said. The Vikings had never won 3 solid straight road games ever in their history. And as a child, we never did well on the road. You kind of chalked up those road wins to the other team almost immediately. Because when the Vikings would go on the road, it was just kind of an automatic L. And not just most of my childhood, a lot of my adulthood in the early 2000s. That's just what it was. Once we got past Moss and Culpeper, I mean, those 2010 to 14 teams were pretty lean.
Yeah.
Pretty lean. And then there were a few years bookended in there after Denny Green and before or after to Leslie Frazier. But that was wild. That game, I'm watching it, and there's a lot of things to kick around there. That there's a lot of tires to kick. I think first and foremost, there was a throw that Sam Darnold made in that game to Jordan Addison.
I know it's throw exactly the second you said it.
And it was absolutely one of the finest throws I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. And Coach O'Connell talked about it today on Paul Allen's show. And he said it's one of those things we do in practice. And he said, actually, that's the same play nearly that they ran against the Colts where the cornerback jumped it. Mm-hmm. And he said the reason the cornerback jumped it is because Sam didn't wait long enough for it to develop. And so he said now, he goes, Sam, and he got his feet right, he got his timing right, and it worked out. He said that was the play that we had called. So it was interesting that they go back to the well, they get the dial up they want. And I have to say, no disrespect to JJ, but if Addison's going to do that tippy toe shit down the sideline, he ought to be getting 7-8 throws a game.
Oh, for sure.
That was unbelievable. I mean, the shot of his foot down that sideline.
Beautiful.
Are you kidding me?
Well,
yeah.
One of the things that I appreciate about this Kevin O'Connell, Sam Darnold partnership is the fact that Kevin O'Connell, as we all know, is the quarterback whisperer. And I've been saying it that Sam Darnold gets a little too jumpy in the pocket. He gets a little too jumpy when he's oh my God, when he's rushing himself, because I can't think of the action scrambling. There it is, scrambling. And, after the loss at the Rams game, they really were like, we need to get back to basics. And they did that. They're still doing that. Yeah. And I think that is so insane. I also just want to point out to everybody, the Vikings had never taken a quarterback in the top 10 draft picks in their entire franchise history. We did this year. Yeah. The Vikings have never won this many road games in a row in their franchise history. We have this year. And now, of course, I'm knocking on wood. I'm spinning in a circle 3 times. I'm spitting over my left shoulder, throwing salt, all the things. This year, as I said earlier, was supposed to be a rebuild year. We had a ceiling of 6 wins. We were set to be dead last in the NFC North. But Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi shut their laptops. They turned off their phones and they said, no. If we're going to rebuild, we're going to make it competitive and we're going to make it hard for not only ourselves, for not only our players, but for the other teams in the NFC to keep up with us. They still are top 5, if not top 3 in point differential after our 2 losses. Yeah. And everybody was like, oh, we're just repeating 2016. We're just repeating 16. And I stood firm and I said, no, we're not. And here's why. The Lions are a good-ass team, and we stayed toe-to-toe to them at home in Minnesota. Yeah. If we can stay toe-to-toe to them with them at home, I firmly believe we can stay toe-to-toe with them in Detroit. Second of all, that was a tough loss. The Lions absolutely exposed us, and it took us a couple of games to adjust. And that's normal. That's natural, especially when you have a short week and have to fly halfway across the country to California. Yeah. It doesn't help that the Rams also, had Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua come back from IR that same game. Does it suck? Absolutely. But I stood firm and I was like, we are not going back to the 2016 Vikings. And the reason why is because Kevin O'Connell is going to sit Sam Darnold down and they are going to work on the basics. He is going to, Brian Flores is going to sit down that defense and go, here's how we adjust. Now, would I like it if we had more help in the secondary? Absolutely, I would. And I need people to stop telling me that we need to build our pass rush to take alleviate some of the pressure on the secondary. That's not how it works. You could have the best pass rush in the NFL, but if they don't get to the quarterback, if the quarterback still makes that pass and you have no secondary, to me, this, and I've said this to you on a live, I've said this to my followers on lives, this is not your grandpa's Minnesota Vikings. They're scrappier.
Right.
They're grittier, to have a double meaning there. And to use my own nickname, they are a spitfire of a team.
Yeah.
They absolutely deserve that win in Chicago. And we love to shit on the Bears. The Bears are also in a rebuild year. I will admit that. I don't think they themselves will admit that. It is a competitive rebuild. It's not as competitive as ours. They need to get rid of Matt Eberflus, as much as I hate to say that as a Vikings fan. They need...
I don't think you need to apologize for that. Someone had mentioned about Eberflus. I mean, I don't know that getting rid of Eberflus is going to fix them. I think it's one of those things where they're rotten to the vine.
They just need to restart.
I think the ownership group is bad.
Yeah.
I think it's like a Jets, right? Rodgers goes there, never was a loser in his whole life, consistently, goes to the Jets, his leg blows up. The next year he comes back, and they're terrible. He can't, and he's old enough now where he can't will teams to victory like he used to. But I don't know, there was an article that came out, I don't know if you're on Substack at all, but if you go on Substack. Some of the best Viking writers are on Substack. Okay. Tyler Dunn did an article on Substack where he interviewed Blake Cashman. And Blake Cashman was days away from retiring from the NFL.
Yeah.
Drafted by the Jets. His leg got all tore up. They pissed around with his rehab. They didn't take it seriously. He went from having a groin, and then he tore his hamstring, so he missed that part of the season. He comes back, and then he's a backup, and they fire the coach. They finally agreed to trade him to DeMeco Ryans and Houston. And he said that's what turned his career around, but he was ready to quit. And you look at Blake Cashman. Imagine that guy walks away from the game, a top 10, 15-ish linebacker. In our system, he's like top of the line. I mean, he's a guy that notches every post. I mean, he's just everywhere he needs to be, and he's kind of the glue that holds that whole thing together, as we found out. And, for the Jets to take a guy like that and destroy that career is malfeasance. And I'm afraid the Bears, if they're not careful, are going to do the same thing to Caleb, which they did to a lesser talented Trubisky and a lesser talented Fields. Yeah. And there was nothing, and I tell my Bear fans this, my friends, I couldn't have been prouder of Caleb on Sunday.
Oh my God, yeah.
Kota, that guy's arm.
It's insane.
I mean, he whistled one by Van Ginkel where he should have intercepted it, and any other quarterback,
it would have been an interception.
It'd been an interception. Yeah. He lobs that basketball pass down the sideline to DJ Moore.
Beautiful. It was artistic.
It wasn't DJ Moore. It was DJ Moore. And he just puts his hands up, and the ball just plops in. Not only was it a great throw, but it was a great catch. And so that's all the flowers I'm going to give the Bears. But Caleb scares the hell out of me because he played probably the best game of his career. Right. Hold on. I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to play this clip. Sorry about that.
You're okay.
So I'm listening to Score North. I don't know if you listen to them at all.
I don't.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I respect Judd Zulgad. He's old school media. Yeah. Worked for the Star Tribune, been around. He's probably, and I think it's part of his shtick, but he's super negative. And I'm not a super negative guy. I don't want to be bombarded with that. So Score North had a guy call in. Okay, the Vikings just turned 9-2. And I'm going to play this call. This is courtesy of Score North, their Vent Line show, so I'm not taking credit for it, but I'll play it quick. Hold on. Let me go back.
I know we've talked a lot about it, and I listen to you guys all the time. First time caller, by the way.
Thank God.
I guess is my question. Because so completely wrong. I believe he is a great play caller, and I love what he does. But lately, even going back to last year, we're starting to see what I feel like we're starting to see of a lot of one games going back to last year, and it's kind of a revolving pattern, I think. Thank you guys. I appreciate you.
Before you say anything, I'm going to say this. I feel like Viking fans deserve good things.
Yes, we do.
And you may think, and I'm biased, right? You may, and I think maybe this is a California thing, but don't be offended by this, right? There is something that I believe in the term of like karma and vibes. I think there is a negative energy in the state of Minnesota, almost like a PTSD, not to soften what PTSD is for people who suffer from abuse and etc. Right. But there's sort of a sports PTSD that I think a lot of Minnesotans suffer from, which makes them inherently negative.
Yes.
And I think that negative energy, and you think I'm crazy, you can think I'm crazy, but I think that negative energy I think it has an effect on the overall performance of the team. And there's no like logical, like science says this. But one of the things I've been practicing this season is the kind of the good vibes, being positive, reinforcing that in what I do when I'm around the Vikings, etc. And their success feels different. And people are going to think I'm crazy for even saying this.
No, I agree.
But I think the vibes around the team, people come into my TikToks, oh God, it was 9-2, but we only won by this. Look what the Lions did. This isn't college football.
Right.
Who gives a shit if the Lions score 50 points? The Vikings averaged 35 points the year they went to the NFC Championship, and they got beat by the Atlanta Falcons on a fucking field goal. So tell me that all those extra points matter. It doesn't matter. Congratulations, Lions. You did what you should do against the Jaguars. I'm not taking anything away from them. But when you go 3 straight road games and you beat 3 teams on the road, and by the way, Tennessee just took it to Houston, are they as bad as people think they are? We whomped Houston. I mean, I know those things don't really match up, but I'm being long-winded. But when I heard this guy on there, I'm like, yeah, first-time caller. Maybe first time on the planet. Maybe first time on the planet. That's ridiculous.
First time caller.
Oh my gosh. And I didn't play Judd Zolgad's answer because it's like a 3-minute segment and he doesn't go off, but he says, I love my callers and I love the people that come on our video chat, right. But he said, like, stop. You're not watching the same game if that's your takeaway from KOC. Now, I will segue into one more thing for KOC. So, sorry about these clips playing. Okay. So one of the things I posted on TikTok, because I watched KOC's press conference yesterday, and Kevin Seifert from ESPN was asking KOC about one Daniel Jones.
I saw the clip. I know exactly what you're talking about.
But I'm going to play it for people so they can hear it because it's ridiculous.
I love hearing his voice.
No, I know. Come on now. No moaners on my podcast, okay? Go easy. Jeez.
Or short term for death. Yeah, I'm not going to really get into that today, but I will say tons of respect for Daniel Jones.
Seifert, I'll keep playing it, but Seifert goes right at him. I love Kevin Seifert because he's the one guy in the room, the real one guy that's old school that will just say, forget it, I'm going for it.
Player in person, got to know him through the draft process years ago, and I'm sure now that he's a free agent, there's probably a ton of league-wide interest in him. Daniel's going to make the decision that's best for him and his career moving forward, and I'm sure he's working through that process right now. But I really can't get into too much about any short-term or long-term. I can just say I've been a fan of Daniel's for a long time. And
now he could have left it there, right?
But he doesn't.
He would have been completely happy to say on to Cincinnati, right? Is the words of Belichick. On to Cincinnati. Right. We're good. Or hey, you know what? You should talk to Adolfo Mensa about that because that's really what he handles. We're out here coaching him up. We love Sammy D. We think Nick is a great backup. We'll leave that to Kwesi. But here he goes again. And if you look at the face, I don't know if you've seen my TikTok, but if you zoom in on O'Connell's face, he's the kid that you had as a parent. He's the kid you have as a child that, did you take the cookie? No. And there's cookie on their face. There's chocolate right on the edge of their mouth.
He has a tell.
And you're going, he does. And so I'll play the rest of this. This is, God, I wish I could show the video. And maybe I'll show the video when I redo the podcast, but this is ridiculous.
Hope, wherever his next stop takes him, it's a
wherever.
Good opportunity for him.
And then he finishes it. After he finishes talking, he goes like this.
We're not going to get into that at this time.
Yeah, he says, we're not going to get into it at this time. And then he says.
Yeah. Have you ever seen West Wing?
I've watched it. I've watched it off and on. I've not actually.
Yeah.
So yes, I've watched it off and on.
It's one of my
Yes.
favorite TV shows, and there's an episode where they talk about how you know that Jed Bartlett, who's the president in this fictional United States, has a tell that whenever he's going to do something, he puts his hands in his pockets, he looks away, and he smiles. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah.
I think that man watches West Wing. I think he took inspiration. And like I said, that man, as much as he tries, definitely wears his heart or his emotions and his heart on his sleeve. I mean, it was very evident when it came out that Kirk Cousins was going to the Falcons how pissed he was, because they almost immediately had a press conference after. And I remember watching that press conference and watching Kevin after they got that question. Kwesi was like trying to kind of like glaze over, and Kevin just like was looking down. He was like angrily writing, and I was like, yeah, Kevin's pissed that Kirk didn't stay around.
Yep.
And with good reason. I too was really upset. We were on a road trip to a national monument here in California when the news broke, and I straight up cried. And people made fun of me on Twitter for that, but like, you know what,
really?
It is what it is.
You liked him that much?
Well, he's on my graduation cap. Like, I did enjoy him that much. But my thing with Kevin O'Connell is that he's an incredibly smart guy. And he knows when to show emotions. And I talked about this when I talked about the J.J. McCarthy thing, is that the emotion that he had in his voice when he talked about J.J. McCarthy versus Drake May was what was enough to convince me that we were going for J.J. McCarthy. My other thing is kind of going back to what you said about like the bad vibes. I 100% agree. And I think I said this on one of your lives. Vikings fans get themselves stuck in a toxic cycle. And it doesn't help that the media also helps perpetrate this. And this toxic cycle really is, we've been screwed over so many times by previous GMs. We've been screwed over so many times by previous head coaches. We've been screwed over so many times with these previous GMs getting veteran quarterbacks and signing them to lifelong contracts. Do I think that they would have signed Kirk Cousins to another 5-year deal? No. I was saying to 1, maybe 2 years, have him help develop J.J. McCarthy and then go on. Which is why when people are like, oh, we're going to re-sign Sam Darnold, I'm like, no, he's gone. At the end of the year, he's gone. And part of the reason why I'm pretty sure we're getting Daniel Jones is because, first of all, who better than the quarterback whisperer Kevin O'Connell himself? We saw what he did with Josh Dobbs. We saw what he did with Nick Mullins. We've seen what he does with Sam Darnold. And I think him being a backup to J.J. McCarthy and helping J.J. McCarthy develop is an incredibly smart move. And I was telling people this, that part of the reason I think Daniel Jones goes to the Vikings is because he knows that he can get a starting job anywhere at this point in the season. He can go to the Raiders, he can go to the Panthers, he can go to any of those teams that need somebody. They're not playoff contenders, and I'm sorry to my friends who are Raiders fans. I'm sorry to my friends who are Panthers fans. I'm sorry, Adam Thielen. Those two teams are nowhere near ready to be playoffs in the next 2-3 years. Yeah. But the reason I know that Daniel Jones is willing to take a backup position somewhere isn't because he signed immediately. It's because he quite literally said on Pat McAfee's show, I'm going to watch this week and I'm going to see who I think is best. And that right there told me everything I need to know. Then you have Kevin O'Connell in that clip that you played doing his little hands in pocket side smirk, looking away. And to me, it's just, you take that idea of Daniel Jones coming to Minnesota. You pair that with the fact that the Viking fans are so afraid of the unknown. They are so afraid of the unknown. We are so scared of something different. People were so scared of us taking a quarterback in the top 10 that they were like, oh, we're going to take a running back. We're going to take a wide receiver. We need this wide receiver. Why? We don't need that. We need a quarterback. Oh, Aaron Rodgers is looking to potentially get out of the Jets. He's coming here. He's coming here. He's going to follow. Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi would rather lay down in a highway than take, especially, and this is what pisses me off so much about those rumors, about the rumors of us taking these like top star players, especially ones with attitude problems. Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi make such an emphasis on locker room culture. Do you really think that it's just skill alone that has us here? No. When a team is not a team, they don't play like a team, which is why I think that we see the Raiders struggling. We see the Saints struggling. And I hate to say it, and I know people are like going back and forth on this. I think that's also why the Chiefs are struggling so much this year, even though they're 10-1. They are struggling. And I think people are so unwilling to accept change when it comes to the Minnesota Vikings. And I mean, I get it. Yeah. Football is a place for us to let out our frustration, let out our anger. It's a routine at this time of the year. You know, every Sunday, Thursday, or Monday, you're watching football. But I think Vikings fans need to acknowledge that, like I said earlier, this is not your grandpa's Minnesota Vikings. They are younger, they are smarter, they are more calculative. And I think it goes back to what we talked about, not to kind of tie it all together. It goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning. Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell are the good balance of knowing what they see is good and knowing the statistics. They are the perfect balance of old school mentality of that was a good play and I know it was a good play because I saw it was a good play. They're the old school mentality of we win as a team, we lose as a team, we fight as a team. But they are intelligent enough to know Daniel Jones, statistically, is not as bad as a quarterback as he seems to be. And the reason why is because of all the other outside factors. And so I think that first-time caller, like I said, first-time, last-time caller, has gotten himself in that. It's hard to leave a toxic cycle. It so is, both from a personal relationship standpoint, somebody speaking with experience, and from like what you expect out of one of your stress relievers. You know, it's part of the reason why it's really hard for people to quit drinking. It's really hard for people to quit nicotine. And I think Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi are what Vikings fans need to quit the addiction to self-inflicted wounds. And I just don't think that some Vikings fans are ready to hear that.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with anything you just said. I do think that there are times, well, there's a couple things. I think Kevin O'Connell sometimes gets in the rut of...
He gets a little conservative.
He's almost always the smartest guy in the room, right? And he's not a smug guy. But sometimes in his play calling, it's like, oh, Kevin.
He gets a little...
Mr. O'Connell.
Yeah.
Just, like, stop running those special plays, those real, like, crazy... Well, you know what? I wrote this down when I was in the bathroom the other day, and I think this hook and ladder, blah, 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 would work. Yeah. Great. Except it's third down, we're down by 6.
Don't do it.
Probably not now.
Don't do it.
Right?
Right.
And with Kwesi, his drafting has got to get better, Kota.
Yeah.
It's his 22 draft class.
It was better this year.
Agree, but the 22's gone.
Yeah.
You know, and I love the Vikings, and I've worked for the Vikings, and I've been around the Vikings. I think issuing a social media happy birthday to Nick Muse and then cutting him, not... Again, in all due respect, because I know a lot of the social media team at the Vikings, and they probably weren't told ahead of time, hey, we're waiving Nick Muse today. And they did say if he passes through waivers, they'll bring him back. And I think he will.
They probably just moved him for Daniel Jones, honestly.
Correct. Well, and then they cut a Caleb Evans. That's the other
thing.
That
one was a long time coming.
They burned out Caleb Evans. Here's the problem. Caleb Evans couldn't cover anybody. No. And he wasn't big enough to be a linebacker or strong enough to be a safety and not a great tackler. No. And he wasn't a good gunner on special teams. So what was a Caleb Evans bringing to this team?
Nothing.
And that's what I'll give Kwesi credit for. When they need to pull the pin on a guy, guess what?
Bye.
You might love him, but we're finished. Greg Joseph. No, Greg, we're moving on.
I will say, to a Caleb Evans credit, he is really good at arguing with people on Twitter.
Oh, he's great. Yeah, he's a gold medalist there. He's absolutely a gold medalist. I know, but that's kind of a foolhardy thing too. One guy I started following on Twitter, not to ramble off on crazy things, but Tristan Jackson. Tristan Jackson, super cool kid.
Yeah.
And he talks just like a regular guy. And he's a bit of a mess at times, but he's a young guy. And that's what you got to give these people their credit too, is these are youngsters. Like when people start going, I have a lot of my TikTok people will go after Dallas Turner. Why isn't Dallas Turner doing this? Why isn't Dallas Turner?
He's a rookie. Give him
21,
time.
Kota. He's 20, and he's 21. He's 21. Jared Verse is 25 years old. Dallas Turner's 21 years old.
And consider what
he's
we
not
have
even
on
fully
defense.
matured physically.
Right. Consider what we have on defense.
So if you play Dallas Turner, who are you sitting? You gonna sit Van Ginkel?
You gonna sit Cashman?
You gonna sit John? You gonna sit John Grenard?
Like, come on.
Who are you gonna sit?
Like, let him develop. Give him time. He's got a long career.
They took the best defender in the draft. He just needs to sit. And nobody wants to do it because You know, why aren't he's a first rounder? You got to get him out there right away. You got to squeeze juice right out of that tournament.
No.
But it's like
that's how you get players
folks,
hurt and they never play again.
yeah. Well, and like I said, this might be the best free agency class that the Vikings as an organization have ever had.
Yeah.
When you look at from top to bottom what they've gotten, and I'll say this, I love the stuff that's happened on defense. I just am I met Andrew Van Ginkel. He's a super nice guy, and he's actually a little taller than you think.
Oh no, I think
but
he's
I get
really
around
tall.
these guys. I was around Chad Greenway last week, and I'm a midget. I don't know if I can even say midget. Small person. I don't know.
You're just really short
Trying
next
to be
to him.
Yeah, really short. I was a really short person. But I think the coup of the offseason is courtesy of that team we hate from the East. The Green Bay Packers gave away Aaron Jones.
Ooh.
And they asked him to take a pay cut twice. They dicked him over. And Aaron Jones says, I had all intentions of retiring as a Packer. They didn't want me. And the Vikings swooped in there. I would not be surprised, and I haven't talked to anybody at the Vikings about this. I wouldn't be surprised if Jones stays healthy and they do okay in the playoffs. I don't know what to expect there, but if they do okay in the playoffs, I fully expect them to bring Aaron Jones back.
Oh, for sure. He is what I think we all expected Zadarius to be. Zadarius, excuse me. I think he is what we all expected him to be, like production and teammate wise. If you need a good Vikings player to follow on Twitter, Najee Thompson is so out of pocket. It's so funny. Speaking of Twitter, last year
or X
or I don't call it that. I'm sorry, I refuse. I will not. It's so dumb. But I started a campaign last year, and I partially credit myself to Joshua Metellus getting as many votes in the Pro Bowl as he did. I started a campaign last year where I said if people didn't vote for him in the Pro Bowl, I would steal their shoelaces. And I guess according to Destin, the one on TikTok, when he met Joshua Metellus at the draft, he brought up my name, and Joshua Metellus was like, "That was so funny. Please tell her I say hi." And so Pro Bowl voting started. And you know what I'm doing? Yeah. I'm tagging him and Cam Bynum, and I'm like, should I start the campaign again? Cam Bynum immediately liked it, and I'm like, all right, here we go. Here we go again, round 2.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, that on their social media, that Tellus by Metellus.
Yeah.
Have you seen his those are great. Those are so good. Josh Metellus is so good. So I took the kids to the stadium for a movie on the field a couple weeks ago.
Good.
And they bring the employees in, and you can sign the kids up for the Vikings Kids Club. Yeah. And I've never had them. They don't go to a lot of games because I work. Right. We went to the Whiteout game last year. But so anyways, I signed them up for the VIP Kids Club, whatever. Well, it comes with a tote bag, and you get this little squishy of Victor, and you get a football, and it's neat, right? It's kind of a neat little package. But one of the things when you sign up for it is you get a free autographed 9x12 picture of a Viking. It's a surprise. But so the guy says to the lady says to my daughter, there's 4 different piles. You can choose out of one of each of the piles, or we can choose one for you. Do you want the same? You want you and your brother to have the same one? Because I have my 10-year-old, my 9-year-old there. And she says, no, we should get a different picture. So she gets her picture, and I open it up because I don't want them touching it because I'm going to frame it. It's autographed, and it's got the authenticity thing from the Vikings. Joshua Metellus. That's who she got. And so she gets Josh Metellus, and then my son says, well, Dad, open mine up or whatever. Justin Jefferson.
Listen, if she doesn't want the Joshua Metellus one, I'll take it.
Well, and it was the whole night it sort of continued because I put my name in a raffle, and there was like 9 or 10 different employee raffle things. By the time it was in the Vikings locker room, which was cool. It was right in the Vikings locker room. And so, and I've been, I'm so spoiled. Like I've been in there so many times. It's like,
yeah, I've been there.
It is cool. They have a locker for Kyrie, which is cool, right? That's very cool. And Jonesy puts flowers in it. But anyways, so I go in there and I'm looking at, there was a 3 Jefferson raffles, and then there was one for maybe it was Metellus, but it was like a pair of shoes, and then there was one for an autographed real NFL football, a Duke, signed by Kevin O'Connell. And I figured that would be the one that would have the least entry, so I just threw my name in there, I come out, and then like 5-6 minutes later, the stadium manager comes up. She goes, look up on the scoreboard. You won the Kevin O'Connell football.
Stop.
I did.
Oh
I
man.
did. Yeah, so I ordered a little glass thing. I'm going to put it in
Yeah.
glass.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
yeah, it was cool.
I
When he ends up in the Hall of Fame after his third Super Bowl,
next to
I
Bud
mean,
Grant.
correct. People will wonder whatever happened to that football that John had that he got at Kevin O'Connell. But we got so lucky that night. It was a beautiful night. We got to watch a movie on the field.
Mhm.
They had great food, and they had Vikings players. They had Jerry Tillery and Pat Jones there.
Yo.
And so I shook Jerry Tillery and Pat Jones's hands. Since I've shook their hands, Tillery's had a blocked field goal,
Yep. Mhm.
and Pat Jones has 2.5 sacks. So,
Listen.
I'm not saying it's me.
But listen,
It could be me.
if you ever get Kyle Rudolph on the show, just let me know and I will clear my schedule. You know how I feel about him. I only have 2 signed helmets. I've got a JJ courtesy of the Vikings, and actually
That's awesome.
Christian Darisaw, also courtesy of the Vikings.
Super nice kid. Met him before.
I know.
Too.
I hope he heals up well. I unfortunately had to watch his injury live in person, and that really, really sucked. I would love to meet the Vikings. You know, I've gone to a couple of games at US Bank Stadium now, and the Rams game was my first time seeing the Vikings outside of Minnesota. But it would be an absolute dream come true to get field passes and to just like shake Kevin O'Connell's hand and to get to meet some of those guys, especially Joshua Metellus.
Right.
So after I made the joke of the me stealing his shoelaces, I started making him a shoelace bracelet out of purple shoelaces because I thought it would be really funny if and when I ever got the chance to meet him, if I went, here's the shoelaces of it,
That's awesome. Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
It's not done yet.
Did I ever tell you this? Did I ever tell you the story of when I met Kyle Rudolph?
I think you have, yeah, and I was so jealous.
Yeah, I met his wife at the Final Four.
Yeah.
And she says, for my listeners, I'll say it again. So I'm at the Final Four, and there's this really beautiful woman.
Oh,
and
yeah.
she's got this tiny baby swaddled up. And I come up and I said, hey, I'm John. Are you from here? What do you do? And she says, I'm not from here originally, but my husband works here. And I said, oh, he like in the Twin Cities? She goes, no, he actually works here. And I go, well, what does he do? And I look over and Kyle Rudolph is just giggling,
Yeah.
And she goes, that's my husband. And he says, hi, Kyle Rudolph. I go, so you actually work there?
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, I actually work down there. And him and his wife both were just super nice people.
Oh, yeah.
And, I sat and talked to her for a few minutes, and what a beautiful family. I mean, she's just a stunning looking woman, but just as nice as she is beautiful. And he is just, a huge guy. So tall.
Well, yeah.
When you get up close to him, you just see how damn big they are.
Yeah.
Like I had a picture, I met Harrison Phillips a couple times, and I have met Brian O'Neill.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
And they are just, they're as wide as they are tall. Harrison Phillips, when he walks, his thighs, I think, just create a forest fire. Because, his
huge.
legs have got to be, I'm not shitting you. I got to find this picture because no one believes me. I got a picture one time with Bryant McKinney. 6'7", 350.
Yeah.
I got a picture with him and Phil Lodeholt. Now, Phil Lodeholt was like 6'8", like 345. Yeah. And so they're around me, they got their arms on me, and I shook their hands, Coda. I'm serious, like my hand just disappeared.
Yeah, God.
These were just 700 pounds of man. And here I am, just like, hey guys.
I have a friend who got to interview Kyle Rudolph for his charity that he started in the Twin Cities a couple years ago, and this was in the middle of my knee recovery from my injury. And I jokingly asked him, I was like, "Yo, do you think you could get me a video of Kyle Rudolph saying hi to me?" Not only did Kyle give a video saying hi to me, he gave such an encouraging video being like, I've been injured, especially my knee. I know how hard that can be, but I heard that they call you the queen of positivity in the Vikings community, and just know that being that positive force, really, really does affect something. And, I've been finalist for most positive on Twitter, Vikings Twitter, multiple times now. That's kind of how I got my start in the Vikings community on Twitter. Right. You don't get to where I am, like having interviewed Paul Allen, having been followed by the Detroit Lions, having as many followers as I do just through negativity. I approach, and a lot of people thought I was crazy this offseason saying some of the positive things that I was saying about the season. Like I said, I originally had us going 12-5 and then changed it to 14-3, and people thought I was crazy. They were like, oh, you're just like maintaining that positive attitude. And it's like, no, I genuinely believe that this team can go again. Who's laughing now? I was positive about Sam Darnold. Who's, and I think, it's, I'm trying to find the right words to say what I want to say. It makes me sad a little bit that the only time that I've gotten to really interact with our team was after a bad moment at a Vikings game due to my knee injury. And, I acknowledge that I went to the opening game and it was crazy and there were legends there. And I appreciate the team for going out and doing what they did for me. They went above and beyond. And that's why I'm such a big fan, because as you know, I went to the Rams game, my purse was stolen, and I never as much as got an email back at all. And I tweeted about it. I made a TikTok about it. I lost my purse. I lost my ID, my credit cards, and it wasn't just a normal clear purse. It was one of the limited edition Vikings purses that they give out every year. And it really upset me because I don't live in Minnesota. So when they do things,
right.
When they do pop-ups.
It's not easy to replace those
exactly.
things. Yeah.
And, I would love to be one of those people on Twitter that every now and then, they acknowledge me and maybe they send me out for a game like they've done for a couple of fans. But the reason it doesn't make me upset that I'm not one of those people is just because I am so fortunate to just be a fan of that team. And, being positive, and I think a lot of people on content who do content creation, not just within sports, a lot of people feel that if they are nice, if they are positive, and it doesn't get them anything, that they feel this need to switch out and be mean. And being kind, being positive isn't supposed to be a way for you to get rewards. And I've noticed that there are some people that when they don't get noticed by the Vikings, when they don't get noticed by their favorite teams, by their favorite content creators, etc., they turn and get sour and negative. And, I was trying really, really hard to get my grandparents to this Rams Vikings game. They are both cancer survivors, and there were some people on Vikings Twitter that were not very kind about it. They ultimately, we were able to get things figured out and we got to go. But that negativity didn't stop me. It didn't stop me that people on Vikings Twitter were being rude and horrible about it. It didn't stop me that it was looking hopeless. I still went out and I got it done. And I acknowledge the blessing that I have to get to cheer for the Minnesota Vikings every single day or every single week. I acknowledge that it's a blessing that this is something that I get to connect with my family on, especially my dad, because that's how this all started. And I acknowledge that talking about the Vikings has gotten me to this position where I do get to do podcasts with you. And I mean, I only make $10 a month doing it, but hey, that's one free Starbucks drink,
Listen, we'll talk about our fee. I told you my fee's negotiable, so we'll figure that out, Kota. Someday when I'm really big, whatever that is. No, you're right, though. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said about perseverance. One of the most favorite moments of mine at US Bank Stadium, and I have to say, sometimes I forget how truly blessed I am to be in the position I'm in. And it's not like it just happened, right? I've worked my ass off for it. But with that being said, one of my favorite moments at US Bank Stadium, non-Viking related, would be when I was a supervisor in the Super Bowl 52 in one of the clubs. It's now called the Suck Up Club, I think it's called now. Mm-hmm. That's the name of the grain bin company.
Oh, yeah.
But I was up there in that, it was FMP Club then. And to watch the Eagles win the Super Bowl after they beat us in the NFC Championship. But to see their fans like me, fans like my dad, fans like my grandpa or my uncle, rest his soul, fans like them who didn't get to see them win the ultimate prize, to see Eagles fans, whether they deserve it or not, most of them, I think there are really, of course, in every fan base, really good fans. To see their fans have that moment and me be able to see that.
It's magical.
It is. It absolutely was just it brings a tear to your eye to think of, even for people say, oh, Eagles fans. Listen, they are fans like everyone else, and you can't take a small percentage of their fans and throw the whole thing down the rat hole. They take it too far. They do. But to see that reaction from their fans when they won the Super Bowl was I mean, it's one of those things you just, I mean, first off, who gets to go to a Super Bowl? I mean, pinch
Right.
me. I mean, right? I mean, I always wanted to go to a Super Bowl. So for me, that was like the reason people said, how'd you get that job? How'd you get that job? You know what I did? I knew US Bank Stadium was being built, and I found an ad that US Bank Stadium was hiring on Instagram.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I
Correct?
fully believe that. And I will never, ever, 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 ever regret any of the shots that I take. I don't live in regret.
Mm.
And
you regret the ones you don't.
right, exactly. And the thing
Yeah.
is that I didn't start making Vikings content because I expected to be famous, to be noticed by the team. In fact, if you had asked me that the first team that noticed me for making football content was the Lions, if you had told me that the Lions would notice me before the Vikings did, I would think you're crazy. But you know, I'm simply here. Would it be nice if the team like gave me a shout out? Absolutely. But you know what? Like, whether they do, whether they don't, I'm still here. And I think a lot of people in this day and age where they think that making content on the internet is like a get rich quick scheme. I think I'd rather be making content because I like to make content than making content just purely for a team to notice me. And again, like if the Vikings never notice me, then that's okay. But I mean, I've lived a pretty cool life so far, you know?
Kota, we're pushing that same boulder up the hill.
Right.
You know, one of my goals for this podcast before it's over is I'd love to get Paul Allen on this podcast. You know, and at my first moment meeting Paul Allen, was at a training camp, and I suppose it was, I know it was where I first really talked to him would have been 2009. It was the year that Favre didn't come to training camp, but was signed by the Vikings. Have I told you this story?
I don't think so.
Yeah, and so back then I was selling, I don't even want to say it out loud, but I was selling possibly non-conforming jerseys. And for whatever it's worth, I had a supplier. And I said to my guy, I hear Favre's going to sign with the Vikings. Can you get me a Favre jersey? And he says, I can have you one in 4 days. Shipped it overnight to me, right? I mean, I don't know who made it.
Yeah.
I don't know that. I didn't ask because
you just paid for
he
it
asked too many questions and correct. I just gave him the cash, right? So and back then I was probably almost 300 pounds. I was big.
Yeah.
And so I walk by Paul Allen and he notices me wearing this purple, it was a away number 4 away jersey. And he goes, ladies, and he's on his radio show, ladies and gentlemen, he goes, Brett Favre has arrived at training camp. And he said, I got to be honest, he doesn't look like he's in playing shape.
Oh my God. I would have simply passed away.
I said, Paul, and because back then he was PA and he had a co-host, but he wasn't kind of he wasn't the icon to the Vikings that he is now. Yeah. And so I said, after he went off the air, I said, Paul, man, you're killing me. And I've mentioned that to him off and on over the years at US Bank Stadium because I've worked the media elevator a couple times. Yeah. And Bursich just loves it because Bursich will be in there when I give him some shit, you know? But so that's one of my goals. I would love to have him on there just because he is such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the team. And he's always got, I'll tell you this. There are a lot of people, Doogie Wolfson out of KSTP in Minneapolis, that have connections to the NFL and connections to the Vikings. Yeah. Nobody is more connected to the Minnesota Vikings inner and outer workings than Paul Allen.
No, absolutely. He is.
Yeah.
I cherish his connection so much. When I was trying to get my grandparents tickets, they were like, a lot of people were like, text Paul Allen, text that. And I'm like, I'm not going to take advantage of him like that. If he offers, great. If he doesn't, great. And, you know, I think a lot of people, I don't know how to say it. Obviously, like, this isn't like at anybody specific. It's just like a general. I feel like a lot of people want to take advantage of one another nowadays, and it's like, I'm in this to make friends, if I'm being so honest. Which is why I'm friends with you. But I mean, listen,
thank you.
Let me see what I can do. I'll leave it at that. Let me see what I can do.
Well, here's the thing. And again, I didn't bring that up like, hey,
I know.
Kota knows Paul Allen. Hook this up, baby. Like, hook me up, right? Yeah. But you know, it's like the Greenway interview came from asking. The Rank interview came from me sending him an email and connecting with him and saying, hey, I totally disagree with you, but I'd love to have you on my show to disagree with you. So, and I have some guests coming up. I have a few more kind of high profile guests coming up. I think I'm going to have Adam Rank back on when the Vikings play the Bears in 3 weeks. So there's some good things rolling. I've done a little radio years ago.
Who else?
And I've
Will you tell me who else, or is it a surprise?
I can't say it here. No, it's a scoopage. If you can ask me off the air, but it's scoopage.
That's fine.
Because I won't say it here because I've tried to tease this thing. But having worked at the stadium, I've made a couple connections here or there. And I have people that, and I've been wanting to do this podcast forever and ever. And I think the best thing that happened to me, well, thank you. Yeah. I mean, the best thing for me was just to kind of get banned from TikTok live, right? Because then it forced me to because it forced me to branch out. Like before, I was like, I'll just do this TikTok thing and we'll be fine. And then I get banned and I'm like, I was in panic mode. Like, I have no way to get to people. And I'm basically, if the gods at TikTok or whatever they call themselves say, it's over.
It's over. Yeah.
Guess what? I'm just done. So anyways, so this we'll get real quickly, and we've been on here for a little while.
We do this
but
every
I wanted
time,
to ask you this weekend. Well, hey, listen, I told you, you say you're busy, but we could make this a weekly thing.
I will try my best.
It wouldn't have to be Kota, it wouldn't have to be an hour. It could be 30 minutes. Right?
I'll send you my schedule.
Listen, and I know you're on California time. Yeah. I don't go to bed till like 1 a.m. here. So you got plenty of hours I sell insurance, so I'm not really working that hard. So I got plenty of hours where we can slide this thing in 30 minutes, and I'll call it 30 minutes with Kota or something. We'll just be like,
air, but
yeah. We'll figure it out. Yeah. So this weekend, just real quickly, first blush, how you feeling about the Cardinals game?
I don't know where I had a notebook that like had all of my wins and losses on it. I don't know where it went, which is a little disappointing because it has a bunch of other stuff in it that I kind of need. But regardless,
of course,
it's how my life goes right now. It's fine. I'm a little hesitant to say it is I'm a little hesitant to say that it's a easy W. Just because I feel like the Cardinals have been really inconsistent this year. They're either really good or they're really bad. And it doesn't help that they're in a close race with the NFC West. But the interesting thing is that it's not even a really good close race. It's kind of like a mid-off race,
That division has been bad. Bad. Yeah, and they're all competitive, but... we'll get into that another day, but boy, the Niners.
They're all tied for first at 6-5. Like, what? So it's our first home game back, which is fantastic for us, I think. We'll definitely be tired. I think it's still a win, however. I definitely think it's a win, especially when you consider our pass rush and our run defense. And I mean, that's kind of really Kyler Murray's cup of tea, really, is running, I think it will be a close game because, again, we just won 3 on the road. We're coming back home for the first time in weeks. And so I think it'll be a win. I think it'll be another close win for sure. But ultimately, I think it really just comes down to, can Sam Darnold continue to stick with basics? What can Kevin O'Connell do to help Justin Jefferson with his separation? We had a really fantastic play at the beginning of the year. I don't know where it went, where basically JA and JJ had a route that like crisscrossed, and it made 2 of the quarterbacks like run into each other, and that's how Justin Jefferson got free that play. And I don't know.
That was the play that Powell got called on.
Yeah.
Powell was running.
It was such
pick play.
It was so good.
And Powell didn't sell it right. Powell blocked. Powell should have ran his route. Like the play calls for running the route through. And then if it's incidental, right? But he went and he grabbed the guy and blocked, and it's like, Powell, love you.
Just hands off.
Calm down.
It's fine, bud. It's fine, bud.
Because all you need is you just need a little separation. Yeah. And Jefferson makes you pay.
I think we should bring that back. That was a fantastic play. But I think as long as Kevin O'Connell, and like he apparently, I think Sam Darnold was saying, like week of the Bears game was coming up with like some of the fantastic plays that we saw on Sunday. So I think if Kevin O'Connell continues to stick in that bag, if Sam Darnold continues to play to basics, and that pass rush just does what it does best, The only loss I personally see in the next couple of games is in Detroit, and again, I think it's a close loss.
Yeah, I think you're right on there, and I do think the Vikings. One of the thing I think that's going to hurt them is it came out tonight that they put Ivan Pace on the IR, and
Well,
so he's out for 4 games. They did sign a linebacker. They did sign a veteran
yes.
linebacker to kind of fill the space. I don't know how much he'll
Interestingly
play.
enough, I don't think Ivan Pace Jr. has been making that much of an impact on the defense this year. I think
Top tackler, though.
absolutely.
Top tackler.
It's been interesting though because since he got injured at the beginning of the season, his tackling hasn't been the best. So part of me thinks
Right. I think he's banged up.
Yeah, I think ultimately, does it suck that he's not going to be out there on Sunday? Absolutely. I love Ivan Pace Jr.
Yeah.
But when my bubby even is calling him, like, she was referring to him as the bad tackler all Bears game. And, like, I was like, oh, that's not really Ivan Pace Jr.'s speed either. So there's definitely something wrong. So I think, as much as it sucks, I think some time on the IR might do him some good. We are definitely in that next man up mentality. I'm really, 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 really hoping that we don't have to play Quisenberry, that Cam Robinson is good to go. I haven't heard anything about him.
Yeah. They'll come out with the injury report tomorrow. O'Connell said yesterday that the foot injury that Cam has is the same one he's been dealing with all season.
Okay.
And so he wasn't sure. We'll know tomorrow if he practices.
Quisenberry did great, though. He exceeded my expectations. I was really nervous. So,
he's one of those guys. He'll come in and pinch hit for you. He's not a guy you want in your everyday lineup, right? He's going to strike out 6-7 times. And to be on your third string tackle is sort of a problem when you're getting into now we're not lucky, but we have truly mediocre teams. Atlanta's a mediocre team who plays in a pretty terrible division.
I have been saying
the Cardinals are a mediocre team.
Playing in a mediocre division.
The Cardinals are mediocre. They play in a mediocre division, and then we got the Bears again.
Right.
And so if we can kind of bridge this back, and I guess I will say this too, what the hell are we going to do with Parker Romo next week?
Just flip-flop between him and Will the Thrill. I will say, and I've been saying this all offseason, and a lot of the Falcon fans don't believe me. Kevin O'Connell knows Kirk Cousins better than Kirk Cousins knows Kevin O'Connell.
Agree.
He knows what to do to push his buttons. And that offensive line is atrocious.
Paul Allen and Ben Gessling were talking about that today on his show, and he said the interesting thing was his Cousins was getting pissed last year during training camp because he said they couldn't get any of their plays to run properly because Flores' defense was blowing it up. And Cousins said, hey, when can we run some of these and get through them so we can see our route progressions? Because he was getting destroyed. Mm-hmm. And he said this year with Darnold and the accompaniment of players they have, it wasn't like that the defense wasn't just dominating all the time. Yep. And so, I think it hurts losing Pace. I'm interested to see if Gabe Murphy's going to get a little play. That was kind of interesting too. So I don't know. I don't know where this thing's going to end up. I expect the Vikings to beat the Cardinals because the Cardinals are not. They're a good team, not great. We may end up. This is the thing, and this is the reality of our situation. It's possible. If we go 3-3, we win 12 games. If we do better than that, which we could be a 14-2 3 seed.
Yeah, which is insane.
Or I guess a 2 seed even. It would be a 2 seed. So we're 14. Well, no, look at it this way. We could be a 14-2, 5 seed. Mm-hmm. Right? Think about that.
And I believe we would play the Falcons.
Correct. We would go at 14-2 and play the Falcons. And then we would go on the road to play Philly or Detroit, who would have a better record. I mean, that's never happened in the NFL. A 14-2 team going on the road for all of their playoff games, unless there's an upset somewhere in the middle.
I wouldn't be surprised if there was.
That we're doing, yeah. I mean, I think the Lions could easily go 16-1.
Oh, for sure.
I don't see why they couldn't. I mean, who's the wrecking ball? I mean, they're going to play the Bills, but who's the wrecking ball that's going to come in and swipe them away? And I don't know that Week 17, unless it's all on the line. The Lions probably won't play anybody.
I disagree, just purely based on how last year went. I would love for the Lions. Obviously, if the Vikings get knocked out, my next choice is going to be the Lions to go to the Super Bowl. I think their issue is that they are playing so hard that by the time they already had their bye was earlier than ours. I think by the time they get to playoffs, they're going to be exhausted.
I hope so.
And I think
I hope so.
It's going to come down to whether or not Dan Campbell is willing to swallow his pride and let his starters rest that last week. And I don't think he is, because he didn't last year. And I think that's ultimately what, at the end, that's why they lost to the Niners. I know people want to say that it was that illegal man downfield. I disagree. I don't think that helps, but I think they were tired by that point. And so I think if the Vikings, I'm not saying that them playing down to their opponent is necessarily a strategy, but if it's a strategy to keep our guys healthier, to keep us energetic, but also play games, so that way when we do get to the playoffs, we're back at the beginning of the season level. I'm not mad.
I mean, at the end of the day, if Jalen, and I tell people this for the last week, if Jalen Naylor catches that pass that Darnold threw perfectly in the end zone, it's 31-13. Everybody shuts the fuck up about it. Right?
Any given Sunday.
That's it. Period.
Any given play.
Period. Yeah, I mean, and like I said, so that stuff really rubs me, because it's not some sort of scoring contest. I would love to see the Vikings going and womp teams every week just for my own heart health, because this stuff that happened on Sunday, I was just like, I thought I broke my hand. I slapped the back of my couch, and my son is yelling things he shouldn't. He hears me say things, and it's my own fault. And so it's just one of these kind of perpetual things as a Vikings fan that you deal with. I've said this, and I'll say it. I worked at US Bank Stadium this is my 9th season. Almost every single game in that place is what I call a meat grinder. It's going to be fourth quarter. You may win, you may lose. It's always going to be this punch in the nuts sort of tough brawl. Vikings will make a mistake. They'll make it interesting. And I don't love that all the time, because that whole experience, and this sounds a lot like a first world problem, but the whole experience of just being exhausted from going through that all day and being around that energy of 70,000 people,
it could be a lot.
It takes a mental toll. It takes a mental toll on a person, because when they lose, you're just like in the middle of negative city. In fact, the first game the Vikings ever lost at US Bank Stadium was to Detroit. And that was that game where the game where Golden Tate did a flip into the end zone in overtime. And I'll never forget, I was down by Lower Penn Tailgate, and that's where Medtronic and Delta Club exit from. So very nice seats. Owners Club, whatever, owner suites. This older lady walks up, and I say, how are you doing, ma'am? And she goes, fuck you. She goes, I pay all this money, and this is what I get? She goes like this and flips me off.
You have a say in how the team plays.
Correct. And but here's the thing. A guy behind her says, here's the thing. We spent $5,000 today for tickets, food, everything. Yeah. And he said, to watch them lose to the Lions, that's what we're getting for our money.
Oh my gosh.
And so in the Metrodome, you could go in there and you could buy a seat for $30 and you'd get liquored up and everything was cool. And then you win or lose, you go home, and that's the Vikings, right?
Yeah.
Well, now you play in the Taj Mahal. Beers are $12. A hot dog is $8.
Right.
If you're in the Medtronic or Delta Club, guess what? You're paying thousands of dollars a seat, and then they get beat by a nobody. I mean, you're fired up. I mean, like I said, that whole thing. I've seen so many things there. Josh Allen's first game there, it was really his first really good game as a pro. We're down 17-0 after 3 minutes, and it's just like those kind of things. I love that stadium, but boy, that just. When things aren't going right there, we were 2-6 there last year. Tell you what, that makes you rethink your choices in life.
Honestly, yeah, a little bit. I mean, I went to the last season, the season opener. I went to the last, but I wasn't down in the dumps about it, because I saw Jordan Addison's first touchdown as a NFL player. But
yeah, it was a weird season. The first 3 games of that season, if I remember right, were Bucks, Chiefs, and Chargers.
It was a rough 3 games. Yeah, it was rough.
It was. We were 0-3, and the thing was that those games there was very little energy in the stadium, because they weren't divisional games, they weren't faux games. And so it's like people were just sort of like, well, we expected to beat the Bucks. What happened here? And then, of course, the Chiefs and Chargers come in, and we don't really care about the Chargers at all. Like Los Angeles Chargers, just pick a city. I mean, whatever. Yeah. So, anyways. Kota, I have kept you for a very long time. I just listen, darling. I appreciate you,
Yeah, thanks for having
and
me.
I love your energy and what you bring, not just to social media for your viewers, but also to me.
Thank you.
You're a kind. I've told you this. You're just a kind, decent person, and I'll give you a bit of old man advice. Life, and I think you know this, but life is hard and life is long. But it's not always about the time you get; it's the time that you spend building those moments. And I think that your appreciation for that already is something that's going to help you later in life, because you've been through it. You've been through a lot of stuff, and I think your perspective is really, really special considering what you have gone through.
I
So,
appreciate that so much. Thank you.
yeah,
Genuinely, like
yeah,
getting to do this with you, whether it's like a live or a podcast or just like being
yeah.
like a Vikings fan with you, has genuinely been a pleasure. So thank you so much.
It's never enough. It's never enough.
Someday we will see a game together, man.
Well, listen, in this TikTok world, it's always what I call drive-bys,
Yeah.
right? Oh, there's Kota hopping in. Western Dakota, there she is. Oh, yes. And when I post this, I'll put your social stuff up
Okay.
too. If you got screenshots of your social, send that to me and I'll post these in
I'll
there.
try my best.
Whatever you got. And I can find a lot of them, but if you don't, I'll figure it out. But if you have them, send them to me. I'll throw those on there. And any last thing you want to say to Viking fans?
I hope you all are gonna have a great Thanksgiving. I don't know when this episode goes up, but I hope you all have a great
It'll go up tomorrow.
Oh yeah, then I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving.
Yeah, perfect.
Happy holidays and Skol Vikings.
Awesome, Kota. As always, thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll put a pin in all that podcast talk. But you know where I stand with it, so not to put any social pressure on you, but
but now all of your viewers have heard, so
that's it. Do you really want to let me down? Is that what your goal in life is?
I think I
gotta go. Kota, thank you so much. You have a good night, okay?
Awesome, you too. Thanks, John.
You bet. We'll see
Bye.
ya.